Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Wojtek Kalicinski. I'm a developer advocate working with the developer relations team in London. And this is my second droidCon, actually. So very happy to be here. And how many of you guys have been following the announcements from Google I/O? Anyone watch the live stream? Lots of you. OK, so I'm hoping that it won't be like all of the stuff that I talk about won't be something that you already know, but I'm prepared that many of those things you might already know of. Hopefully, you'll learn something new. And also, some of the stuff I'll be mentioning has been already mentioned in the sessions here. But just treat it as like an overview, a summary of some key takeaways that you should get from I/O from this conference, and things to dig around for, read more about it, and just start using it and testing it in your apps. So as you probably know, we've just released the M developer preview images for the Nexus devices. And you can download them now from the developer android.com/preview site. And the purpose of this is twofold. First of all, it's a chance for you to get your apps ready to work with the new APIs, the new behavior changes in Android, so that you have these few months before we release this version to consumers, to users, and to make sure that your apps don't break. And the second one is to actually get feedback from you. So we created a special community on Google+ that's being monitored by me and some other guys from Android, from Google. And we really hope that when you're testing the new APIs, the new features, and your apps, if you run into any problems, if you have any comments, please go onto the community. We are really listening. And as you might have heard, we are planning to release OTAs, which is over-the-air updates to this developer preview image before we get to the final version. So you might have the chance to actually shape how the actual release looks like. So please check it out and be active. So the main reason of this and the whole community thing and the whole preview thing is for you to test your apps. And there's several key areas that might break your apps completely and that you need to make sure that work with the new version. And the first one is obviously runtime permissions. This is a complete change to something that's been around since Android 1.0. We used to have these permissions that you had to accept during install time, and they were there pretty much for the whole lifetime of your application on the device. And seriously, if there's one thing you want to check with the new Android M version, it's the permissions. And that's what we're going to talk about during this session mostly. And then there's some other things like auto backup, which seems pretty trivial, right? It's just a service that backs up my application and then restores it on another device. But there's some stuff to be mindful about. Third, those in App Standby. These aren't really developer APIs. There's no API you can actually call there. There is no method, class, or whatever. But still, you need to make sure that you know what it means for your apps, and we'll mention that later. And finally, just go ahead and run your apps and just check for any behavior changes that might break your app. Like, for example, the Android HTTP client, if you're still using it, which by the way, we've been advocating against since version 2.3, I think, it's gone now. So if you're using it in your code, well, it's been deprecated. There is a workaround if you want to have some extra time, but really, just please migrate to HTTP URL request or one of the libraries like OK HTTP. It'll do your app good. And this wasn't really an API. Android has used OpenSSL over the years, and actually some apps are breaking now. I think Uber is breaking because they've been linking against the actual SO, the shared library that's been present in Android. And guess what? If you're linking against non-public APIs, they're bound to disappear and break. So OpenSSL has been actually replaced with boring SSL, and that's not a joke. So yeah, just be sure not to use non-public APIs. So runtime permissions, the biggest change. And why should you care? First of all, we have no permissions dialog on install. So think about all the people in your companies working with like conversions, which means getting people from a website to the Play Store to installing your app. They will be like super happy that the user doesn't have to click through another scary dialog and will probably install your app like more eagerly than they would have if they saw this wall of permissions. Second of all, no permissions dialog means no permissions dialog on app updates. So how many times have you had to go to the Play Store to confirm an app that you already had installed just because it added a single permission? And so that's gone. You can add permissions all you want, and your apps will update automatically in the background. And first of all, having fine-grained revocable permissions means the user will be more happy. They will feel in control. So if there's an app I really want to use, but I don't like it doing this one thing, like I don't want this app to have access to my contacts, but I still want to use it. So that will be possible now. And you get that you get the runtime permissions only when you target SDK M. So I'll explain a little bit how that will work with different versions. But if you want to use like any of the stuff that we introduced in M, this is kind of the reward you get. If you want to use it, you have to support the runtime permissions. And so how does that work with legacy apps or legacy devices? So if you have a pre-M device, a device running Lollipop or Gingerbread or whatever, it doesn't know anything about the runtime permissions. So basically, whichever version you target, it still works the same old way. So you get the install time permission dialog, you get updates that are possibly not automatic, and all the permissions in your Android manifest are granted at install time. So that's the usual behavior. Now, what changes if we have a new device, an M device, with a legacy app that doesn't know about runtime permissions? Well, you still get all those things with one important change. The user can revoke any permission. And since back then we didn't have an API for requesting permissions, your app might break or it might not. And that's for you to test. Now, the engineers at Google have done some really serious work to make sure they just don't throw an exception and break your app. So, for example, if you need to read contacts and the user revokes your permission for reading contacts, you might just get an empty list instead of a security exception. So that's nice, but remember to test. And now finally, if you have an M device running an app optimized for M, targeting M, you get, as I said, no dialog during install, fully automatic updates, no permissions granted at install time. This is very important. No, well, let me explain a little bit more. No permissions with the protection level dangerous or above are granted at install time. So that's why an app can now request permissions during runtime, and it's not just that it may request permission. It has to request every permission during runtime. And as I previously said before, a user can revoke the permission at any time. So you have to be sure every time you want to call an API, you have to make sure you still have that permission. Doing this revamp of the whole permission system was also a good occasion to think about the permissions we have and simplify it. So now we have fewer, simpler permissions. We took all the permissions that were there before and grouped them into 8 categories. You can see and use this right now in the M developer preview, but keep in mind that some permissions might still change between now and the final release. Anyway, we have location, camera, microphone, access to phone state, SMS, everything dealing with SMS messages, finally reading and writing contacts, calendar, and body sensors. And one thing to be aware of is if you request a permission, one permission from one of these groups. So if you, for example, request reading SMS messages, and the user grants that permission, you get all the permissions in this group. So that's an important implementation detail. And also remember that even though we have these new groups and we have this whole new runtime permission system, you still need to make sure all the permissions you need are in your Android manifest. So you can only request those that you include in your manifest anyway. Some very quick UX and UI advice. Only ask for what you need when you need it. So don't emulate the old behavior. Don't put a wall of permissions the first time the user runs your app. If you can show him whatever, a basic UI, something, just let him use your app. But when he wants to like send a photo or read a contact to send this photo to a friend, only ask then. Also, consider just not using permissions. You can always, not always, in some cases, you can just ask the system to provide you with an image from a camera. You don't need a camera permission of your own. Or like open a file from another app using the storage API. So remember, there is this option, unless you really want to customize your UIs and do it yourself. And the last thing, if there are any critical permissions where your app will just not run without them, like if you make an app for SMS messages, it probably needs an SMS permission just to show the initial list. And be sure you explain it nicely during the onboarding flow, and just make sure the user understands why he needs this permission to use your app. And this is how it looks like. So when you request a permission, the user gets a system dialog. You cannot influence how this looks. So this is a system dialog. If you request a permission many times and the user denies it, we get this don't ask again dialog, so that the user can just turn it off. And this is the system settings. If you haven't found it yet, you can actually go into the system settings, into the apps list, and revoke individual permissions for every app in your mobile phone or tablet. And also there's a nice overview of which of my apps are using the camera permissions. So just another way of looking at the same data. And of course, the code. It's very easy. Not a lot of learning here to do. So we have a new method, check self-permission, that you have to use every time that you want to use a method that needs permissions. And then you just request a permission and get a callback in onRequest permissions result when the user finishes going through the dialogues. So if you request, like, for example, 3 permissions, the user can actually allow, deny, allow. So you get an array of the user's choices and decide what to do next. Now, it might be a little bit tedious to go through your code and look and try to find every place where you actually call an API that needs a permission. Because sometimes you might just not remember that it's actually needed. That's why there's a new runtime permission, runtime permission annotation in the support library, and it's being used by Android Studio to flag the methods that actually need permissions, so that you get warnings or even errors during your compilation. So for example, methods in the framework like get last known location are annotated with the permissions they need. It might be one, it might be many, and some of them might be optional. But the result is, during programming, you actually get, this nice red line saying you need to request permissions. You're not checking it. Moving on, auto backups. I don't know if you know this meme. This is the 3rd time we're doing Android backups, and we've become exceedingly efficient at it. But this time, to enable it, you have to basically do nothing. If you target M, your entire app, including app data, like files, databases, everything in your app, it gets uploaded to Google's cloud. And if you move devices, if you get a new phone, install your app, you actually get all the state from your previous device, with the exception that it's limited to 20 megabytes, I guess. But there's several things you need to make sure of to not break your app, like use platform APIs correctly. They're there for your benefit. So instead of handcrafting all the file paths, like using /SD card /something, just use the appropriate APIs for get my files directory, get my cache directory, which is nice because the cache directory is not being backed up, for example, because it's just cache. And if you do use those APIs and get this path finally, don't save absolute or relative even paths to your, no, just don't save absolute paths to your databases, because if you get moved to another device, the SD card or whatever you have there might be mounted at an entirely different location. And finally, there's just some stuff that shouldn't be restored to another device, like, for example, Google Cloud Messaging registration tokens. Because if you restore it to another device, your push messages will just stop. You will just stop receiving them at some point. And to help you with that, you can actually specify a scheme for your backup. So you can, by default, everything except cache and a special folder is backed up. You can either exclude a file, database, preference, or external files. Or if you use the include tag, then just that which you include will be backed up. Being on the subject of GCM and registration tokens, there's actually a new thing in Google Play Services, which will affect everyone who uses GCM. Even though the old registration tokens will still work, now we have something called the instance ID. And it's more of a broad concept. It's an application instance identifier. And basically, it identifies and tracks a single app installation. So if I install an app on my phone, that's a single app installation instance. Then if I install it on another device, that's another instance. They will have two different instance IDs. It also provides security tokens. So if you have an instance ID, you ask it for a token, for example, for use with GCM. And this might seem a little abstract right now, but it's no different than just using a registration ID for GCM. But you can also use the tokens with other services and even use it for yourself to verify app authenticity and check if the app device is still active, like when did it connect last to the GCM service. And you do it by doing a call from your server, for example, from your backend, to a server that we call the instance ID service server. And it gives you a reply saying, this token came from an application with this package name. And you even get an app signature and connection type and connection date, so you can get some more info about your app. This is pretty useful stuff. And even though we're just starting with GCM right now, I'm sure it will be useful in the future with many more things. Also in GCM, we have GCM topics. So before, you could send GCM messages to a certain device or a certain user, meaning the user would get a message on all his devices. Now we have this publisher-subscriber messaging. So a user, an app, can subscribe to a topic. Like, for example, give me weather updates in Berlin. And if a lot of users subscribe to this topic, you do only one push from your server, and every device will get this message. So it's pretty nice. Moving on, dose mode and app standby. These are part of what we call Project Volta, and this is basically an effort within Google to make the battery on your devices last longer. And as I said, there's no real developer APIs here. Dose mode means it's basically what we call coffee table mode. So if you leave your tablet on a coffee table, because you're not using it, it's just laying there and it's discharging, then you want it to last as long as it can, because you might come back like 4 days later and you don't want to pick up your tablet and see that the battery is all gone. So basically, if we detect that the device is not being used for a significant amount of time, we disable network access. We disregard all wake logs. We don't run sync jobs, sync adapters, job scheduler jobs. No alarms except some special ones can wake the device. And this might seem a little brutal because your apps will not get fresh data. But don't worry, you will be able to send high priority GCM messages that will actually wake the device and let your app do some work. And besides that, even in those mode, every certain amount of time, the device wakes up for several minutes just to let your apps do some work. And I don't want to say it's exponential backoff because I'm not sure of the exact algorithm, but it gets longer with time. So for example, the first dose period can be 1 hour, but the next one can be 4 hours, and then even a day. So the longer the device stays unused, the longer the period gets. And app standby is something similar, working on a one application level. So if I don't interact with an app for several days, if I don't launch it, if I don't see the UI, if it doesn't post any messages, any notifications to my screen, then the system can optimize this one app and also deny it access to all these things like wake locks or network connectivity. And in this case, you can make sure that your app will have the chance to synchronize once a day, roughly. So don't count on it. But these are some things you have to be aware of, and just test your apps and see if they work correctly. Also new in Play services, we have the GCM Network Manager. Some of you might have heard on Alex's session what it's all about. Basically, we've had this job scheduler thing since Lollipop, but you couldn't use it on all the devices. So now we have GCM Network Manager in Play services, back to Gingerbread probably, or even Froyo, I'm not sure. And it's basically the same thing, except so you can specify a task to run in a specific window of time. It can be a one-off task or periodic. You can specify that the device has to be charging or not, or it has to be on Wi-Fi or mobile or not. And the only difference is in GCM Network Manager, you can't specify that the device has to be idle. And the other small difference is Job Scheduler will run your task after a specific deadline has passed, while GCM Network Manager won't. It will still be waiting for the right network and charging conditions. Of course, there's a lot of new other APIs in the framework that we announced during Google I/O, but we don't probably have the time to go through all of them. So some honorable mentions. I don't know how many of you will use the fingerprint API, but I've heard questions about it. So you can actually test it on the emulator right now, even if you don't have the devices supporting it. Because remember, even those devices that have fingerprint sensor still need to be updated to M before you can actually use the platform APIs. But one thing that came out from the work with the fingerprint sensor is a cool API that any one of you could use, and it's KeyGuard Manager, create confirm device credential intent. And it's basically an intent that launches your lock screen, your confirmation screen. So if you want to make sure in your app, like a banking app or other secure stuff, that your user, the valid user of the device, is still interacting with the device, you can just ask him to put in his password, even if it's like a PIN or a pattern or whatever he set up, like face unlock. They could just do it, and your app will get a response that, yes, the user confirmed that it's him. So that's pretty nice. App linking, this is a change of behavior, actually. So before, if you clicked on a link in a web browser or even another app that opened any known web page like Instagram or Facebook or something that you have an app installed for, it will ask you, which app do you want to use to open this intent, like Chrome browser or the native app. Starting with M, you can actually link your app and your web page in the developer console. And once this link is confirmed with a special file on your server, clicking on the, sending the intents with the proper host will just go straight to the app. So no more dialogues asking the user. Direct share. You might know the new share menu. Now apps can actually put more than one icon there. They can provide some useful things like share targets. So if you have a contacts app, it can push your most used contacts straight to the share menu. So you don't have to go into the app and another selection process. So any app can do that right now. Check it out. We have voice interactions, so there's some pretty cool stuff going on with Google Now, where you can start plugging in your apps to the voice search in Google Now. And now you can actually go ahead and have a conversation with your app. So if I say, like, open, I don't know, chicken recipes on some recipe app, the app can actually tell the system that it needs more information and ask me questions like, how long do you want to cook it? And then I say 30 minutes and go back and forth until the app finally opens. So that's pretty nice. Also, some optimizations to the notification system. There's a new class called icon, and you can set the icon in places where you would normally set graphics and notifications. And not only it's a bit more flexible, but there's some significant memory gains to be had here. Just less copying bitmaps around the memory, shared memory, and so on and so on. So small change, but can benefit you and the user ultimately. And we're all waiting for it. There's not much details, but there will be definitely an assist API for the now on tap thing that magically gives you results for whatever's your app is displaying. Up next, let's talk about some tooling, so the things that support you in your job as an Android developer. This has been covered pretty extensively during one of the sessions, so I apologize, I didn't know that, but not all of you were there, so let me repeat some of those things. To configure it, you add it to your build Gradle. You have to add a dependency, use a pretty recent Gradle plugin version. And finally, where you usually apply your CommAndroid application plugin, you also have to apply the data binding plugin. And what it does, it lets you define variables in your layouts. So one thing you might notice is that the root node of the layout is now has to be this, just layout. Then the data section where you add your variables, and then finally your usual layout, where you can actually use those variables to fill the layouts with data. And then in your activity, you basically get these auto-generated classes that are generated for your compile time, and you can just bind your data from your code to your XML with one line of code. What's nice about this, it's auto-generated, it's all done in compile time, so there's almost no performance performance degradation with this. There's a lot of type checking everywhere, so the classes are generated for you. There's no room for mistake there. Like if you do find view by ID, you usually do casting. If you do casting, if you change something, that'll break. And finally, there's a pretty neat expression language that you can use in the layout. So you can actually move, I don't want to say logic to your views, but you can actually do some cool stuff depending on your data, like use a certain resource in one case or another in your layouts. I've mentioned a new annotation that requires permission annotation. There's actually some more. They work in conjunction with the Android Studio, and they are actually there in the support library. So we have we can now set ranges for parameters. So most of these annotations, their aim is for your code to be correct. They check your correctness and the time when you actually write your code instead of during runtime. Float range makes you lets you specify what range the argument is in. So how many times have you seen methods like set alpha or set transparency or set opacity, and you never knew if it accepts a value from 0 to 255 or from 0 to 1. So now that's checked for you. There's an annotation called call super, which just checks if you called super in your methods. Like every lifecycle method on create, on start, on stop needs that. It'll be checked for you. And by the way, you can use them in your methods too, in your code. So you can actually make your code work for you and check your correctness. Check result makes sure that you use the result of the function. So sometimes we think like, if I do a substring on a string, then it's done, it's modified. Well, no, because strings are immutable, so you actually have to assign this somewhere. So that's where this annotation comes in and makes sure that you actually use the result. And there's many others. Just go to toolsandroid.com. There's a whole page devoted to annotations, and you can get all the info there. There's more even in older versions of Studio. And finally, one of the big things we announced, the design library. People have been waiting for it a long time. It basically lets you implement the material design guidelines that we've been talking about for a year now. And it does that by providing several widgets that you can use in your apps, like navigation view. And you might be asking, how is it different from a drawer layout that we had for a long time now? Well, navigation view, you actually feed it an XML file with the menu options you want to appear there, and it actually creates the layout for you, so you don't have to do it by hand. Of course, we get a new version of tabs, because that's always a problem when we change the look and feel of the platform. We finally have the nice edit text widget with the floating label. So when a user actually is typing something, he can still see the label of the checkbox of the edit text. We have the fabulous floating action button. And to top it off, we have the coordinator layout, which actually it's a top-level layout. And if you put all those things in it, it will do some magical stuff like it will take care of hiding or showing your tab bar when you scroll at a recycler view, or it will move the fab a little bit to the top if there's a snack bar on the bottom. So it does some magical animations for you, so you don't have to. Android Studio, a long time coming. C and C++ support is coming probably in version 1.3. And, whoa, my microphone is slipping. And how many of you use JNI or native code in your apps? Quite a few. So you've probably been waiting for it. There was no good IDE that was integrated with Android. I know it's not available in the version that's currently on in the Canary channel, but it's coming soon. And especially for you, droidCon, here's our live demo. If everything works correctly, which it never does, but let's see. Right. There we go. So here is a version of Studio. I hope you can see it. Running the Hello JNI sample from the NDK. And first thing you may notice is I have these arrows here. Now, this won't be a full demo of the C and C++ editor, where you obviously have things like refactoring and go to source and find, unused variables. I just want to show one cool thing that we're doing that will make integrating your apps with JNI code a lot easier. So you see these arrows here. When I click them, I go straight to the implementation of the method that I declared as native in Java code in the C or C++ file. What's even cooler, if I go back, I can see that I have this second native method that is unimplemented. And so I use IntelliJ's fixme function. And it says create function blah, 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 this long, very long name in native code. And if I do that, bam, I have a function in my native implementation, and not only the whole name is correct, which is pretty awesome by itself. Notice that I had some arguments like an array or a string. Yeah, you can clap. And I added an array, like a byte array and a string, and notice that it gives me all the boilerplate I need to access those in native code, and even does the cleanup so that I don't leave any dangling pointers. So that's pretty nice. And yeah, that was just a short demo. But this stuff is coming, and I wish I had it for the past 2 years when I had to write native code in basically the notepad. OK, we're back. Next. How much time we got? We're almost ending, so just a few more things. Honorable mentions coming also in Android Studio 1.3. We will have a new visual theme editor, so that is really nice for editing all your colors and fonts and everything in a nice way, in a whole new visual editor, so you don't have to dabble in the XML files. Some new debugging improvements. So when you use the inspector to look at your variables, you can now actually, instead of seeing like 0 or 64, you will actually see what the values mean if they're actually bit masks and the flags are defined in Android source. And also, you will get resource values in the inspector. So if you get FFDE something, you will know it's actually a string from your resources. Easily adding Google services. I think you can actually check it out in the version in the Canary channel. If you right-click on your project, go into module settings, we've started adding some Google services like analytics, cloud messaging, that you can add with one click to your project. And some of them right now just add the Gradle dependency, so that you don't have to look it up. But some, like analytics, actually let you log into your account, pull down all your analytics accounts, and create the base configuration for you. So you don't have to go to the browser and look it all up in the Cloud Console or whatever. We have a separate unit testing module for those of you who test your apps. And last honorable mention, live templates, a function I didn't know about until my colleague, who is sitting next to me, asked me if I maybe want to show them around. And I thought they are pretty cool. And I'm mentioning them because actually that colleague is none other than Ben Weiss, who used to be a very active community member here in Germany. And he sits next to me. At work, he created this GitHub. You all can go and actually help us with new live templates. And I will show you how it works in a sec. Basically, these are very cool shortcuts if you're writing your code for Android and you do like repetitive stuff. Again, boilerplate code, pretty tedious. And you just input a few characters and press enter, and bam, you have this whole code that you would normally have to look up or type yourself. So just some examples. Press Command J or Control J and type new instance. Bam, you get a whole new instance method for creating fragments with a bundle for arguments and stuff like that. Run on UI thread, use it a lot probably. Logging, just type log d enter and it'll create the whole line for you. And finally, one thing I want to show you, parcelable. And these are the last slides, so don't worry about time. Let's try going to Studio again. No, not this window, this window. So let's say I have a plain old Java class like permission, because I was doing something with showing permissions on the screen. And let's say I want to send it through to another process. So on Android, I would usually use a parcelable, right? But I never remember how to like add this functionality to a class, because you have to have some kind of builder or creator and input or output or something. So if I just go and say parcelable, and there it is, create a parcelable block for your current class. OK. Blam, I have all the needed constructors, methods, and even a parcelable creator with my class name in the generics here in the template. So pretty cool. You can all participate in this. Go on Ben's GitHub, and if you have any ideas for new live templates, please do make a pull request. And going back to the slides. Oh no. Let's just get rid of that. That's all. Thank you. And if there are any questions.